Heat fans are in a bad spot right now as the team has struggled to start the season. So we're opening up the mailbag to answer your questions. I repeat, your questions on why Nikola Jokic isn't playing, rookie Jaime Jaquez's potential, and yes, even a question about the possibility of trading Jimmy Butler. Plus, some statistics to show just how dire Miami's start has been on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg. Joining me, as always, David Ramil. However you're tuning in, YouTube, Odyssey, your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code, all lowercase, LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. We'll get to the emergency meter later in the show, but David, we had a bunch of questions come in for our post-game show after the Heat's loss to the Nets on Wednesday night that we couldn't get to in that episode. So we thought we could do a full mailbag episode to address all of these concerns, get to as many of these questions as we can. We do have one about a Jimmy Butler trade later on that should make for a fun debate, but let's just jump right in. Our first question here comes from Money Mitch, who writes in, what I will be looking forward to will be the in-season tournament. Will it take the tournament to wake up Jimmy Butler? David, what do you think? The in-season tournament starting Friday night against the Washington Wizards at home at Kaseya Center.
Starting tonight against the Wizards should be a fun experience there. At the same time, as much as I think the league is trying to build things up, like we've seen Jimmy shoot down like the notion of making the all-star team or even an all-NBA selection. None of that, I think, really matters all that much to him. So I don't think he's overly concerned with the in-season tournament. I think he wants to get things right as far as straightening the ship out and making sure that everybody plays their best. He wants to make sure that he plays his best. I think he wants to win whatever game possible. I don't think he's adding anything special to his game on Friday. He's not going to show out just because of the in-season tournament game. So I don't think it's going to provide any extra motivation, because I think that's part of the concern is that with the in-season tournament right now, there's not much to motivate these players in terms of like any benefit for them.
Well, it's $500,000. Do you think $500,000? Yeah, for each player that wins the tournament. I wonder, even for a guy like Jimmy, who's making whatever, $34 million this year, $500,000 still $500,000. I do wonder how many there. I'm sure that some players are like, whatever, I'd rather just not play these games than make the $500,000 or whatever. But the NBA is trying to. The reason they're doing this is for player participation. That is the big initiative of this year. Is let's increase player participation. We've instituted the new 65-game minimum for season awards, and we're trying to make this in-season tournament with a player incentive, because fans don't care if these players make another $500,000. What do we care? Right? There's no incentive for fans to care about this in-season tournament, but there is an incentive for some players to care about it. I do wonder if the $500,000 will make Jimmy Butler get up and say, you know what? Maybe I will approach this a little bit more like April. The problem is I think that there's a fundamental question about what it is that's slowing Jimmy Butler down to start the season. And maybe it's a lack of motivation. Maybe it's a lack of care for games in October and November. Or maybe it's what's on the injury report right now, and there's some tendonitis in that knee, which only popped up on this injury report in the last couple of days, David. But it explains a whole lot, doesn't it? I mean, this guy is he missing jumpers short because he's not motivated, or is he missing jumpers short because his knee is giving a problem? And this knee that's given him problems for the last 3-ish years is sort of cropping up again. I think it might be more of that. And I don't know that some sort of made up in-season tournament changes the status of his knee. You know what I mean?
No. Yeah, no. If anything, it's, with these games being played, it would be less motivation for him to play, regularly. You can just say, oh, somebody else will take over. And it doesn't really matter. I think the injury is more of a lasting concern, especially for the rest of the season. I don't know. Like, Jimmy, we've talked about this. Like the mileage is bound to just pile up. And, we keep kind of saying, and I've been saying this for years, like at what point do we start to see the signs of Jimmy slowing down and Jimmy aging? And I don't know if it's going to be this year. Nobody knows for certain, but right now he does not look at 100%. And it might just be something that time can heal, but at some point in everybody's career, there's never enough time, and you'll never get back to the way you were when you were in your mid-20s or even early 30s. And for Jimmy, that could be a problem.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't claim to know how it is that tendonitis works, but that it's happened so early in the season after he didn't play in the preseason, to me, is concerning. He's 34 years old. At some point, the age becomes a factor here, and I think we're almost spoiled by somebody like LeBron, who's still doing what he's doing at 38 years old. That we forget that other guys just sort of age naturally. Like, and Jimmy Butler is probably one of as great a shape as Jimmy Butler is in, and he is in terrific shape. At some point, the knee is just the problem. We saw this with Dwayne Wade. At some point, he just, sorry, man, now you're a sixth man. And I'm not saying that Jimmy Butler is at that stage in his career. We're not that far removed from him being like Michael Jordan in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. But I think it is something at least to monitor. Would the Heat be better off just shutting Jimmy Butler down for a little while? Because they kind of play better without him a little bit right now. When he's limited in this way, I wonder, okay, would it be worth just shutting him down for a week or whatever, however long you think it is necessary, so that he can just fully get over this tendonitis thing?
I don't know, because I just don't know that we're going to ever see him be back to 100% or as close to as whatever he can get at this point in his life and his career. Like, I mean, he had the summer off, whatever days he took off, whatever games he took off, because he was practicing with a team, but whatever games he took off for the alleged dental procedure or not, like that's
you still don't believe that happened.
No, I do not. Like, I mean, I know a fellow media reporter said that he might be having a teeth straightening or something like that. I don't know. Those don't look any straighter to me. It don't really matter.
You should ask him to open his mouth and like, hey, do you have any wisdom teeth missing or something like that?
That's gonna go over great. Yeah, I can't wait for Jimmy to answer that.
Say
yeah. No, I don't know. I think he's had rest already. I mean,
that's the thing.
It's not going to get any better.
You barely did anything so far, and like you could tell me that training, suppose that we had a Hunger Games practice today. It's still practice, dude. Like, I know it's the Heat, hungriest, most feared, dirtiest, nastiest team, whatever. It's still practice.
It's on the jersey.
Right. It's on the New Jersey. It's still a practice, man. Like, you're getting hurt in practice. No, you're not. So I don't know. It is concerning in terms of the in-season tournament and its role here. Maybe there's a little bit like, it's probably not black and white. There probably is a little bit of Jimmy Butler being like, whatever, I don't care. It's October, it's November. And maybe an extra $500,000 in his pocket could motivate him to do a little bit more than what he's doing so far. But I don't think a made-up in-season tournament that the NBA just created out of thin air has anything to do with his right knee. And that is more of the problem right now with him.
This is not a mailbag question, but what did you make of Bam Adebayo's comments in post-game presser yesterday? Because we weren't there for that particular statement because we wanted to record a recap, and you had just been in the locker room. You saw what he said about the looming deadline, about wanting to straighten things out, and then before the deadline comes up, because you never know what could happen regarding the trade deadline. Mm-hmm. That was an unusual reference. Are you buying or selling that it's something that the team is concerned about?
I think that's Bam basically acknowledging that this trade deadline could be important for this team, and maybe even putting his teammates on notice a little bit. Like, hey, if you want to be on this team, step up. Otherwise, you're out of here.
Damn.
He's the captain of the team now.
He is the captain of the team.
That's a captain move. That's a captain move. That's, what? You know who'd be proud of that? Udonis Haslem. He kept it real. He was there for his bros in that locker room, but if you weren't stepping up, he was fine calling you out.
I suppose so. It does seem a little unusual, but maybe it's the added responsibility.
It is unusual for Bam, but
yes. But it's the added responsibility of being the captain. Like, he leads the pregame kind of team circle, and he kind of gets everybody going. Now he has to be that kind of voice if that's what it takes. Jabbing at a couple of guys and letting them know, hey, you want to step up. You have to play your best while you can to help us turn this thing around. I don't know. It's interesting.
Speaking of the trade deadline, instead of whales, should the Heat be going after swordfish? We're going to be talking about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. With the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League, a league created specifically for combo projections that include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, LeBron James, Travis Kelce, a 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made plus receptions. That's a good deal. I like that combination. Prize Picks makes everything so much easier. They even offer a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured for football and basketball games. If you've got a player who exits a game in the first half and does not return to second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. It's so easy to use. They make, again, daily fantasy sports so easy. So go to prizepicks.com right now /LockedOnNBA. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Daily fantasy sports made easy.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. Continuing along with the mailbag here, we're going to get to our Miami Heat emergency forecast podcast later in this podcast. Yeah, it's a gimmick that I made up. And of course, you know, my gimmicks, David, are always way more complicated than they need to be. And that's what's coming up.
Did you get the whiteboard back to Pat Riley's office? Were you able to sneak it in time, or do you think he still knows it's not missing?
I put it under the doormat for him.
Next to a key?
Right next to the key.
Dwayne's not coming back to save the season. Sorry. I mean, he might be in good shape too, but he's not coming back to play.
I would rather watch Dwayne Wade at 40 years old, however old he is, limp his way into 12 points a game than whatever is happening right now. Anyway, we do have a couple of trade questions actually coming up, but let's get to this one from Andrew Can Do It All. People say Jaime Jaquez Jr. doesn't have star potential, but he's the same age Jimmy was when Jimmy entered the league. Spo seems like he'll let him compete for the starting 4 spot by the end of the year. We have a 2-timeline approach team right now. Could he be a Jimmy Butler / top 12-ish player in the future? What is his ceiling? David, what do you think?
Man, that would seem like such an incredible rise. And we talked about it, I think, during the preseason in terms of what Jaime Jaquez's potential could be. And I was a lot lower on it than you were because I thought there was kind of a cap on what he'd be able to do over the course of his career. But I mean, it's a legitimate question that we just have no way of forecasting. Like, I don't think anybody saw Jimmy Butler being the late pick that he was in the draft and where his role was in that version of the Chicago Bulls team with Derrick Rose and Joakim Noah and Luol Deng and everything else like that. But he just provided a spark that Tom Thibodeau needed for that roster, like, a defensive guy off the bench who could help out in the backcourt. And he just worked and worked and worked because that's
he was like what Josh Okogie is now for the Phoenix Suns. And that it would literally be like Josh Okogie 4 years from now becoming a top 15 player. It was a little bit like that, wasn't it? I mean, at least he was a first-round pick, but that
yes.
would have been,
A lot of things have to break right there. Like, I mean, eventually he got a bigger role, but then Derrick Rose wound up, succumbing to injury, and guys left the team or traded. Things change, roles change, and Jimmy kept getting commensurately better season after season.
That big playoff series against LeBron. Remember, everybody that basically defended LeBron won the MVP between him, Paul George, and Andre Iguodala. If you held LeBron to 27 points, you were like a Hall of Famer. But
it's a high ceiling.
It's a high ceiling, and it's unfair. I mean, but Jaime Jaquez right now as the 18th pick looks like one of the steals in the draft, and I think that's fair. And I think he's only going to get more rotation time as the season goes on. I think Spoelstra is going to have a really hard time keeping him off the floor. And I think that much has been proven already, and it will only bear out, I think, further as the season goes on. The interesting thing to this question about to me is we have a 2-timeline team now. And I think it's a really great observation by Andrew here, because I've kind of been hinting at that and saying it in not even as clear as that in the past, but you've got the Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry kind of conglomerate here, basically running things in Miami. And then you've also, but if you just sort of remove them from the roster, the Heat have the 9th oldest roster in the league right now when you weight like minutes played and who actually gets rotation time and all these things. They have the 9th oldest roster in the league. That's according to the Ringer, Zach Cram, who did a good piece on age recently. But if you remove Jimmy and Kyle from, and I guess Kevin Love too, out of the rotation, this team's really young. You're looking at Bam at 26 years old, Tyler at 23, Jaime Jaquez Jr., Nikola Jovic, a bunch of other young guys. Like Caleb Martin's actually on the older side of that spectrum at like 28 years old, right? And so, but still, it's a really young team. And so they are operating on a little bit of a 2 timeline thing right now. The problem is that these timelines, first of all, don't really add up because the first timeline has such a small window of maybe a couple of years at most here with Jimmy Butler, it seems. And then the other window has a really long runway, but I don't know if it's necessarily a championship window if you're building around Bam and Tyler Hero. It's a playoff window, but I don't know if it's a championship window. And the other part of this too is like these 2 timelines, like the players in their respective timelines don't really go together. Like there's an on-court chemistry problem with Tyler and Jimmy. And the top 3 players on this roster between Jimmy, Bam, and Tyler, I'll throw Bam and Adebayo in this mix. Like their games don't really mesh. Like they succeed because of heart, hustle, and coaching and whatever it is that the Miami Heat culture thing is. But like just in terms of like an X's and O's tactically, like what it is that their skill sets are, they don't match at all. They do not play off each other well, even a little bit. They only do it because all their basketball IQs collectively are so high that they just figure it out on the margins. But I think it's an interesting point to make.
That's a hell of a bomb you just dropped right there. I mean, that's you kind of buried the lead, right? Like that's
you disagree though.
Maybe it's an overstatement to a certain degree, but it's not. You're not 100% off base. Like I mean, all those guys operate basically in the mid range, and so
right. That's the problem.
Yeah, watching the game, rewatching the game, or at least part of it, because I mean, it was just I knew what was coming. Like it's man. And then watching some other NBA basketball games, it's like, you've got guys that are open from 3-point range and they take the shot. I didn't think that was something that you could do after watching just enough Miami Heat.
Or even you run a pick and roll and you get all the way to the basket. I wrote a piece for allyoucanheat.com and a separate mailbag piece here, breaking all this down like mathematically, believe it or not, me. But it was basically taking the rating.
You have somebody check your work. I mean, I don't know.
I sent it to somebody. It was, you take the formula to calculate offensive rating and you say like, even if everybody on the Heat basically shot 50% from mid range, it basically ends up being the worst offense in the NBA since 2016. It's an offensive rating of 100. Now that's obviously an unrealistic thing of 100% of your shots are coming from long twos, but man, it feels like it's close to that with the Heat, right? I got some numbers later, but they're not taking threes at the right rate. They're not getting to the rim hardly at all. Most of their shots are just long twos. And like I said, if everybody on this team is basically prime Michael Jordan from long two range, that's the worst offense in the league since 2016. Just from an offensive efficiency standpoint. Like it's just, and yet you think about all their sweet spots. Where's Jimmy Butler's sweet spot? That little leaner in the paint, about 8 feet out, that's his sweet spot. Bam Adebayo, the free throw line jumper. Tyler Hero wants to dribble into a contested long two-pointer. These are these guys' sweet spots right on the elbow. It doesn't make for an efficient offense. All right, let's move on, though.
To wrap it up real quick with another point here, Jaime Jaquez has to develop a three-point shot because it's just a different era of basketball. Like Jimmy could become the player that he is today without the three-point shot because it wasn't necessarily as much of a priority in 2011-12 when he first joined the league. But at this point in time, I don't know that he'd be able to get to the level he has been given the opportunity, given all the free range to have the ball in his hands as much as he has without the long range shot in his arsenal. So
it's going to be tough to have like that Jimmy Butler status, top 12-ish player in the league without the 3-point shot where this league is going. Jimmy might have been the last of them. Right. And so
DeMar, him and DeMar. Yeah,
exactly. Billy from Cleveland writes in, wanted to express my condolences that you actually have to watch the pathetic excuse of effort that has been the Heat this season. But what I find really pathetic is this damn chasing whales talk. Gordon Hayward, LaMarcus Aldridge, Kyrie Irving, Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, Damian Lillard, Donovan Mitchell, James Harden. You know what all those whales have in common? They have never put on a Miami jersey, despite endless amounts of time linked to them by free agency or trade demands. Like to stick to the Moby Dick and marine animals references, we already have 2 whales in Jimmy and Bam and a dolphin in Tyler. We don't need whales. We need stingrays. We need swordfish and octopuses. I think it's octopi.
I don't know. I think it's both, actually.
Okay. We need players like Bojan Bogdanovic, Christian Wood, Buddy Hield, Miles Turner, Seth Curry. We need real role players. Right now, our whales are surrounded by jellyfish, tuna, and some broken coral. When we have gone out and caught big fish instead of whales, it has made a huge difference for us. Having players like Andre Iguodala, Jay Crowder, PJ Tucker, Kyle Lowry have been the reason the Heat have been to 2 finals and 3 conference finals in the last 4 years. Not even a question, David, but just a wonderful email that we get from Billy here, a loyal listeners of ours for a long time here. Yep. I don't even know if I need to respond to it. I just loved it.
No, it's great. But I will say, I think the Bogdanovic option is really, really tantalizing. Like, I know you were all in on it last year, and I was like, no, I think they've got enough. Ooh. But
Oh, boy, on Bogdanovic? I was sort of in on it. I want to say all in on it.
Okay. Do you think he would fit with this roster better right now?
Well, he's injured for 4 more weeks, but after that, maybe.
He's better than ride it out for 4 more weeks. I mean, despite Billy's concerns about our
here's the problem with the trade thing is we're only like 2 weeks into the season. I know the Heat are ready to make a deal, according to this email and whatever, but I don't know that there's another, like the Pistons. Why would they make a trade right now? They have no reason to. Like, no other teams have a reason to make a trade right now. Again, it's why I was banging the table for James Harden, is because the Sixers were ready to trade him, and you can get him in your building right now before the season goes too upside down. By the deadline in February, that he could be out of this thing. Instead of buyers, they could be sellers, And I obviously don't think that I don't predict that they would be, but they could be in the position where they ought to sell, maybe is a better way to put it. So I don't know, but I do. You and I have had this conversation a couple times, even this week. We agree. Stop going for the Moby Dick that you ultimately never catch, right? At the end of the book. I'm pretty sure that's how that ends. But go for your stingrays, go for your swordfish, go for your octopi. Those are tasty, helpful animals. Like, I don't know. Like, it's I like a little charred octopus as an appetizer. It's nice.
Oh, never
a little bit of lemon.
Nope, never had it.
Should try it. You should try it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about Nikola Jokic. Let's talk about the possibility of Jimmy Butler getting traded after this here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better team to get in on the better time, to get on the action right now with the NFL and NBA season in full swing. The app, so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and so much more. Go visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and kick off the NFL season. That's FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL and NBA.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. We'll be back for our everydayers on Monday with a recap of what happened over the weekend. Let's continue along with the mailbag before we get to the Miami Heat state of emergency forecast here. This question comes from Richard Worka, who writes in, is there any view of where Jimmy might get traded? Let's just skip right over would the Heat trade Jimmy Butler, and we're skipping right over to that too. Where's he going? I got 3 teams for you, David. Are you ready?
No, I'm not. I just want to go on record as saying I'll hear him, and I think if Richard asked the question, and maybe some of our listeners would want to know if they'll even entertain it. But I will say this, at least from my perspective, I don't think they ever should or would trade Jimmy Butler. Like, I think maybe we half-heartedly discussed the possibility at some point last year, but I don't think it's a realistic option. Like, I know if you're going to be stuck in terms of like his contract demands a couple of years from now and what that might entail, and whether
not a couple of years from now, it's coming up this summer. That conversation happens this summer.
I mean, for a contract extension that takes him beyond what? Yeah. So you don't have to renegotiate this year.
No, but he's going to want to. I mean, you're going to have that conversation with Bernie Lee at some point, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, for now, Jimmy seems like he's content here, and I don't think that's going to change either. Even if they were, even if they were bad, I don't think they'll miss the playoffs bad. But even if they were that level, I don't know that Jimmy would necessarily he would want changes to be made, but I don't think he's going to request a trade.
It's a good point.
I just don't see it happening. I unless Jimmy is really a very, very, very good actor, and I don't think he is. I don't think he's disappointed with the way things are going right now. Like, he's upset and to the point that he wants to keep winning. But anyway, like let's say he storms into Pat's office, like, Coach Pat.
You keep putting this on Jimmy though, like that he would have to demand a trade in order for a trade to happen. But I would, if the Heat don't want to give him the extension, and they're okay, well, we're not going to give him an extension. So what are we going to do? Could they?
But that's not to entertain during the season.
Trade them? No, not during the season.
Okay. So I think Richard is saying, like, and a lot of people, we post these videos every day, and a fair share of our listeners and viewers are commenting, trade Jimmy, restart, lean into the youth movement, etc. A Jimmy trade is not happening during the season, unless Jimmy Butler specifically goes into Coach Pat's office and makes a request.
That's a good point. And you owe it too much, and you have to respect last season's run enough to not do that in the middle of the year. Even I would say that, and I'm the most like, hey, the regular season matters. Let's have some fun. Guy here. But yeah, you can't trade Jimmy in the middle of the year unless this team is, I mean, they would have to be in a bad way by February, like 10 games under 500 and just
but even then you could sell him on having the number 1 pick. This isn't what happened with Dame Lillard, like, we're years and years of growing frustration. Like, they went further last year than Lillard ever did in Portland. So I don't think it's apples to apples there. Even if you're that bad, you could say, hey, guess what? We got a nice number 1 pick coming up. That's going to be a hell of a draft asset that we can use to rebuild our roster, to retool it rather,
or trade it for another player. But yeah, no, that's fair. It's all
that's
fair.
what I mean.
But I'm you and I agree. It's not happening anytime soon. But let's say it. Let's kick the can down the road. Let's look at this summer, and let's say the Heat is, hey, we're not going to give you the contract extension. What do you want to do? And Jimmy Butler's like, well, if you're not going to give me the extension, I'm looking around and I don't have really a chance to win here. And maybe whatever stuff happens, crazy stuff happens in the NBA all the time. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that these two sides decide to divorce over the summer. And let's just say, based on this question, hypothetically, that's exactly what happens. I've got 3 teams for you, and then we can move on. The first team I've got is Memphis. I think the Grizzlies already tried to do this with Marcus Smart, and it hasn't worked, where they get like a mature voice in that locker room to kind of hold those young guys accountable. Jimmy Butler could be that guy, at least. Hypothetically. I mean, it worked out great in Minnesota and Philadelphia. But I don't know. I could see the Grizzlies like talking. And by the way, he plays like literally the only position of need for them is a small forward. Jimmy Butler would be a perfect fit there in terms of positional need and what it is that they need on the court. So I threw Memphis out there. Would they be willing to do like Zaire Williams, Marcus Smart, Brandon Clark, stack a few of those chunky salaries together, throw some draft picks at Miami and put an offer on the table? Yeah, sure. I could see that.
The point guard Miami needs, Marcus Smart. Now we'd have 2 defensive player of the years on the roster. Sorry.
Atlanta.
Oh.
They're always looking for wing help. They got a bunch of young guys. Would they throw like a DeAndre Hunter and Jalen Johnson kind of group together and some picks? Maybe. I could see that. The Heat might not be psyched to trade him to a division rival, but I could see them at least putting a call in. And then the other one is Houston. Jimmy Butler is a Houston native. They're not good, and I think they wanted to be good, right? They signed Fred VanVleet, Dylan Brooks. They've got these other guys that they're really excited about, Jabari Smith, Sangoon, Green. They've got these guys that they're excited about. Could you throw Jimmy Butler in that mix to really raise the floor for that group? I could see them maybe saying, you know what, let's just like take a swing here. Those are the 3 teams I came up with, but that's all.
Crazy theoretical here. I can imagine somebody would probably think it's a good point. Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry for Dylan Brooks, Fred VanVleet, and like draft picks. Would you entertain that? Like, it gets you off of Lowry's salary. You get a good point guard in VanVleet. Is it worth even considering?
What's VanVleet's contract? He just signed it, right? So it's going to be
2 years.
I'm not. You know me. I'm not a VanVleet guy. I think he's maybe been the most overrated NBA Twitter nerd guy in the league for like 3 years. He had one good year. I'm sort of out on him.
You hate overachievers.
I really do. And look, he's like really friendly with the media. So like Toronto media really hyped him up. And it was like, I'm just like, I don't see it. Like, he's a small point guard who's not an efficient jump shooter. Like, and he's an okay defender that you can shoot over. Like, I never really saw it with him. He had one good year and they won the championship and when he was coming off the bench. So I don't want to hear it. So yeah, the answer is no. But would I entertain it? I would entertain it like, I don't know, like a Saturday morning cartoon for 20 minutes, and then I'd realize what I was watching, and then I would change the channel.
You want Dylan Brooks in a Heat roster? Sorry.
I don't care, but I think our cameramen might have an issue with it. Our next question comes from Free Jovic, who writes in, why the decision to draft Jovic but never play him?
Yeah, I think it comes down to the defensive issues. I think that's been the biggest concern. I think the reason why Jaime Jaquez is getting playing time is because he's showing a lot more on the defensive end than Nikola Jovic did even last year, as a rookie, and now this year as a sophomore. So I think he's still young. I don't think he's as bad as Spo might believe, but I think it's enough of a concern where he's not going to do – he can't do enough offensively. This isn't like Michael Beasley and your second overall pick that year where you kind of need something out of him. You know that Beasley is going to give up a lot defensively, but what he did was, he made up for it to some degree offensively, where he was basically a net neutral on his playing time, but he was also the second overall pick, and you kind of have to throw him out there. This is a completely different situation. And I wonder if things would be reversed now, or different anyway, than they were in 2008 when Spo just took over the team for the first time. He might say, I don't give a damn what this rookie, where he was chosen in the draft. He can't play defense worth a damn. We're not going to play him. So
I think it was a very different situation, right? You had Dwayne Wade, obviously superstar, but then outside of that, it was like Michael Beasley's kind of already our second best player, even with all these faults. You know what I mean?
Wow. So, I mean, Jamario Moon erasure here. Jeez.
History will forget Jamario Moon, unfortunately. But this team is just, they're trying to win right now. You nailed it with the defensive issues. Spo just doesn't trust him. And look, there's been moments where he's on the court right now, and I see even Jaime Jaquez pointing him in the right direction defensively. Like, he's a little lost defensively at the NBA level. Rebounding is very hit or miss, right? I know he had like 11 rebounds the other night. That's not the norm for him. And unless the offense is really clicking, he doesn't really add anything. So you're really kind of going out on a limb there when you put him in the rotation. You and I are very big fans of Nikola Jovic. I think that there's a lot of good things that when he gets on the court, the tempo tends to ratchet up, and I think that's good for Miami. I would like to see him in there with that second unit a little bit more. The real problem is, whose minutes does he take? Anybody could just say, you're like, he should play and he should play and he should play. All right, well, who's coming out of the rotation? Because Spo's not going 13 deep in this thing. You know what I mean? So it's Haywood Highsmith's got to be in it. Caleb Martin, when he's healthy, is going to have to be in it. It sounds like Jaime Jaquez Jr., as much as he has to be on the court, he might not even be out of the rotation. Is Josh Richardson losing minutes? All these things. We had another question about, maybe he should take Kyle Lowry's minutes. They don't play the same position. That doesn't make any sense. So you're looking at the forward group. Whose minutes does he take? That's a real question. Maybe Kevin Love, but like, for all the warts of Kevin Love's game and the fact that he is aging, he's still a more reliable player on a night-to-night basis than Nikola Jovic is. You have rebounding, you have basketball IQ with him, you have the threat of him spacing the floor, where their other opponents, they see Kevin Love, a Hall of Famer, and they say, we got to close out on him. I don't know that they feel that way about Nikola Jovic. Even make or miss doesn't even matter. Just the fact that they're closing out and spacing the floor that way. So that's really the reason there. And it's why I've been also arguing, by the way, that this team kind of needs a consolidation trade by the deadline to make room for the Jaquez's and the Jovic's, because I think if you don't basically win the championship this year, the best thing you might be able to accomplish this season is finding out what these two guys are and whether or not they're A, part of your long-term future and building blocks, or B, can you build up their trade value to make that move that you've been trying to make over the last couple of years? Because if they're just sitting on the bench not playing, they're not going to have a whole lot of trade value. But if they're out there and pressing, that changes a little bit. All right. That was it for our mailbag questions. Quickly, David, I know we're running out of time here, but I've got my Miami Heat state of emergency forecast game. Are you ready for this?
Yeah, why not?
So here's how it works. I'm going to do this almost like in a hurricane meter type situation, right? We're doing a state of emergency. We got a hurricane forming off the coast, right? It's just right outside of the Bahamas right now, about to make landfall on the east coast of Florida. And we're deciding, is this a Hurricane 1? Is it a Hurricane 5? Like, what kind of panic are we talking about here? So Hurricane 1, so you're going to be able to rate all. I'm going to give you some statistics here, and you get to tell me, all right, are you approaching that statistic like you're approaching getting ready for a Hurricane like 1 or Hurricane 5? So Hurricane 1, for people that don't know hurricanes, for our listeners not based in South Florida, or Hurricane 1 is like, all right, like I got some water. But basically, I'm not making plans this weekend, right? That's sort of what that is. A Hurricane 3 is, all right, let's make sure the generator's working. Let's get the shutters out. Let's stock up on some water and canned goods and stuff. But I'm not not like freaking out here. I'm prepared for the worst case scenario, but I'm not
Wow.
freaking out.
You really are underselling how severe some of these hurricanes have been. A Cat 3 is pretty severe.
Okay, that's
Cat
like
5.
That's a Cat 2-ish. All right. A Category 5 is like full blown, lock it all up, we're evacuating. Okay. So we got a Hurricane 1, a Hurricane 3, and a Hurricane 5. You're not beholden to those three. You could tell me a Hurricane 2 or Category 4.
Right,
like
I got you.
1 to 5 scale.
I got you.
All right. First thing. Offensive rating for the Heat this year is 104.8. That's ranked 24th in the NBA. What category of hurricane is that?
It's Cat 1. I don't even shrug that off. That was where they were last. That's better than they were last year or comparable, right? So
in terms of ranking, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not overly concerned. I want to see some improvement, and I don't know that we're going to get it. But for now, I'm not overly concerned.
I'm a little bit more concerned than you are, but I'm not surprised. Right. I guess it's sort of what you're saying too. It's like, what were your expectations? We were kind of wondering, like, could this team be in the top 20? They're 24th right now. I guess the answer is no. I don't know. 5 games in, we'll see. Defensive rating 110.7. That's 17th in the NBA. The defensive rating by itself is actually good. That would have ranked 3rd in the NBA last season, but we're talking with small sample sizes. 5 games in.
I think there are some issues defensively though, and especially considering, injury has been a problem too. So I'll go a little higher on that, maybe Cat 2.
So you're talking more like eye test type of thing more than the stats, because I think I'm with you. I'm a little concerned about what they're doing defensively. What's your biggest concern defensively?
I feel like they've given up a lot of easy looks, and as they're incorporating some new personnel, not everybody is connected. It's not the 5 on a string that everybody loves to talk about. It's just very, again, guys like Josh Richardson, who were supposed to be an upgrade defensively over a Max Strus, that hasn't been the case. Like, he looks a little discombobulated out there. Thomas Bryant is going to have defensive issues. Jaquez is going to have his problems. Jovic is going to be his problems. With no Haywood Highsmith there, kind of as a stabilizing presence.
No Caleb.
Kevin Love no Caleb. And those guys that have been part of the system for a couple of years and are certainly plus defenders.
Yep.
I think that's been a concern. So I'll say a Cat 2 for now, but I think it could stabilize.
I'm gonna go Cat 3, because if you're gonna be bad offensively, you need to be elite defensively, and I don't know that this team is going to be elite defensively this year. Their point of attack defense is atrocious. I mean, you have Kyle Lowry and Tyler Hero starting, and you've got Josh Richardson coming off the bench, and he's not been, to your point, the defensive presence that you thought maybe he would be. They have no, like, when you're going, we haven't seen the Heat have to defend an elite, quick point guard yet this season. When that happens, this group is going to get exposed in a big way, and I'm a little bit worried about that. Our next one, 3-point attempts, 33 per game, on the low end.
It's on the low end, 33. It feels
against the rest of the league. It's on the low end.
Wow. Yeah, I can't see them even maintaining that level. Like, I know you prefer them to always, a 40 benchmark is always what you look to. I don't think they're going to get close.
What I look to. Again, Ulster looks to.
Yeah. Well, I would say then this might be more like a Cat 3, I guess.
I'm there because I also don't see the way out right now. We got Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero, who I've been saying they have to combine for 20, 22 3-point attempts per game to even reach the 40 mark. Like, you look at this personnel, who's taking threes on this roster at a high volume. It's really only those two guys. And they're averaging 15.6 combined 3-point attempts per game. That's not even close to what they need to be at.
I was rewatching the game yesterday, and honestly, like, Duncan had some of those same open looks that he's passing up now, and he needs to
dribble
rewatch
now,
what he was. Yeah, I love that. I do love that, and I will not be shamed for loving that. I think that the kind of versatility, because we saw what happened when he was just so. Everybody was so hyper aware of the fact that what he was going to do, that it was a problem for him to get his shot off. But man, we need to go back to where he was a few years ago when he broke on the scene in the first place. Like, he was just rising up and pulling up on dudes. Like, his shot's not going to get blocked. He's 6'7". Like, he's you can stick your Wembanyama's and your Mobleys on him.
He's excited to show everybody what he can do. Right? He's like a kid that just learned how to do a front flip into the pool, and he's like, "Mom, look, watch, mom, look what I can do." Everybody's like, "Yeah, that's cute, that's great." But for Duncan Robinson, it's like, it's great that you can dribble and make a layup now, but we just do the threes. That's what this team needs from you. Like, this team has enough guys who can hit a floater, right? Like, that's kind of a problem for this team. You've got to hit the threes. All right, restricted area field goal attempts and percentage, okay? So this is the amount of attempts they get in the restricted area. They're ranked 27th in the NBA. They're making them at a 60% clip, which is 6th worst. 60% is not good when you're right at the basket.
You forget battening down the hatches. This is call your loved ones and say goodbye at this point.
God.
I don't know that. Yeah, right. I mean, that's a little. Sorry, that was a little extreme, but yeah, I think it. Cat 4, Cat 5.
No, Cat 5's good. Cat 5's good. Because what's the out? Who's getting to the rim a bunch on this team? You know, we talk about 3-pointers all the time, but this team doesn't also have like a Giannis type of. I mean, nobody really does other than Milwaukee, but you know what I'm trying to say. Like, who's the vertical threat who's getting to the basket all the time? This team also ranks near the bottom of the league every year in dunks, just straight up dunks. And those are really efficient shots. They're not just highlights, right? Like, those are the most efficient shots that exist are dunks. And we kind of equate efficiency with 3-point shots. The shots at the rim are literally the most efficient shots in the league, not the 3-pointer. And they don't get nearly enough of them. And it's all these floaters and all these things that, great, you hit them at a 50% clip at best. And this is why, by the way, these leads by the fourth quarters keep dwindling, right? It's because you could do this in a small sample size, but the more basketball you play and the more other teams are taking shots at the rim and from beyond the arc, the easier it's going to be for these teams to catch up to you. And that's basically what's been happening here. The Heat have been outscored in every fourth quarter except one, which was against Milwaukee when the Bucks took their foot off the gas. And that's really the only reason the Heat got back into that game.
They were down 20-something
25.
to begin with.
Yeah. And they lost the game anyway. So, all right. Let's do one more here. Jimmy Butler, 7.5 free throw attempts per game.
Tropical depression, not even a category for one.
I'm with you on that. Once the knee gets better, he should be better. All right. That'll do it for today's Locked On Heat. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.